even though with the storm I was going through, the first sense of peace I had felt in about a month was when I was reading the Word of God. You know, it says that it's the peace that surpasses all understanding. You just can't understand it, but it's like whenever you're in there, man, the Holy Spirit just kind of just spends some time with you a little bit and put your heart at rest for a second.
Hey, welcome back to the God Behind Bars podcast. I'm Jake Bodine, and I have the honor and pleasure of sitting down with a gentleman that has been formerly incarcerated, actually for some of the most unique, unfathomable reasons, and we'll jump that into a minute, but God is using him in a huge way. His name's Greg Kelley. Greg, it's good to have you, man.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, man. I'm excited. I'm excited to kind of get to know you and your story and a lot of unfortunate things that led up to this point in your life, but God has used every single one of them to kind of lay the groundwork for your purpose and what you're doing today. And so why don't you just jump in, tell us kind of how you were raised, and then all the way up into the point of your incarceration.
Yeah, so to take you all the way back, I'm from a city north of Austin called Leander, Texas. And I grew up with two loving parents. My mom, my dad loved each other very much. My dad was a car salesman. My mom owned her own cleaning service. I grew up with four older brothers. Two of them were in the nest with me while I was going through school. Two of them had already went off to college, and they're both doing very well. All four of them are doing very well.
Four older brothers, man. What's that like?
Four older brothers, man. You know, I'm the youngest.
Get picked on a lot?
Yeah, I got picked on a lot. But I guess the older you get, the more you understand that you're thankful for those older brothers, because they did it out of love. You know, they didn't do it more so out of like, you know, we're over you, you know, we want power over you, and they did it because they want to toughen you up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And but they never shied away from letting me know that they love me. And I knew that they loved me by, you know, showing up to my sporting events, and they were athletes too. Both of the brothers that were in the nest with me at home, they were in high school when I was in middle school, and both of them were really close because they were a year apart, Doug and Jonathan, and they're both Texas state champions in the 4x4 relay.
Wow.
Back in 2008. And so phenomenal athletes. Everyone was an athlete in my home. Sports was our identity. Growing up, we grew up Catholic. We went to mass every Sunday. And yeah, I mean, it was just like clockwork, man. Like, it was sports, you know, church on Sunday, coming back home, family time. We just felt like the all-American family, right? And so another thing, too, is we didn't grow up with much either as far as financially. We grew up in a mobile home out in the middle of Leander Hills, which is the AKA country, rolling hills of Austin, Central Texas. So, you know, we really, sometimes it was hard because, you know, money was tough, but we always survived and made it through. And so growing up, playing sports was a big outlet for me because I wasn't very good at in school. I figured I had dyslexia in the first grade, so it held me back 1 year. So I always struggled academically. And so 8th grade came around, had friends. I was going through a lot of changes. I always grew up kind of a little chubby, a little overweight. So I was going through puberty. And when I went through puberty, I shot up 6 inches, 7 inches. And I met this one girl in 8th grade through mutual friends, and I kind of knew of her from her family history. Her older sisters were well-known dancers on the dance team in the high school, and father, his name's David Anderson, very well-respected leadership coach, golf coach at the high school. Tracy Anderson, her mother, dance team director at the high school. Just very a family of high esteem. You know, I liked her. I thought she was really pretty, and she thought that I was cute. And next thing you know, we were going to this water park at the end of 8th grade, going into our 9th grade year, and we were flirting with each other. And next thing you know, I asked her to be my girlfriend, and now we're boyfriend and girlfriend going into high school. I go into high school, and I immediately get pulled up to varsity because of my athletic ability. I figured out I was good at football, and so started going through all that freshman year, sophomore year. I get at the end of the year, I get a starting position, and now I'm getting dialed in football now. Like, I'm getting good enough grades to get by. And I'm starting to take school more seriously now. So going into my junior year, something happens with my family when it comes to health. And at that time, Gabriel and I were going strong in our relationship. And it was the Christmas Eve of my sophomore year. My dad suffers a very terrible stroke. The worst you can possibly get. Whole right, left or right, I forgot. Side of his body completely limp. Gets put into the hospital. So going through that at a young age is tough. Seeing a father who you respect, who's been there for you in your sporting events, who's done everything that he possibly could do to be the best father he could be for you. And a man who led by example is how I would categorize him. And so that happening to him really shook me because he was like my hero. He was my role model. But I had to keep moving forward. And I had to go out there, and at least I can make him proud by getting a scholarship. So I'm going to dialed in. And then my mom, a few months later, going into my junior year, my mom gets diagnosed with multiple brain tumors. My dad's in the hospital still. Now I don't have parents anymore. My mom has to get rushed to surgery. She goes through surgery. They get most of it out. And I'm left kind of alone, a high schooler, trying to figure out, like, my brothers are trying to organize how I'm going to get to school. I'm having to catch rides with strangers, with people. It's just a tough situation. And I was already getting college scholarship or college, not college offers just yet, but college letters and interest. And so that was great for me because that lifted my self-esteem towards what was going on in my life. And so I chose to still move forward. I tried to do the best I possibly could. Now, at the time, I had friends. I had friends. I had teammates that were like my brothers, and they would drive me home, make sure I was good. And then I had one friend named Jonathan. He was a year younger than me, and we were friends through mutual friends. And we developed a good friendship. And he was my backup in football too. So Jonathan had a home close to the school, and in the home, his mother ran an in-home daycare, and his father was a landscaper. And so a lot of people would go to the home after school sometimes, football practice, and it was some sense, if I could just kind of depict it for you, like Grand Central Station. Like, people were coming and going, and there was really no like rhyme or reason to the whole house. It's just people were coming, playing video games, eating pizza rolls, leaving. It's just the mother welcomed every high school kid into the home, and she loved that role of being like that second mom, right? And so his family caught wind because I shared what I was going through with him, and all my football friends knew what I was going through. His mom caught wind of what I was going through, and out of the generosity of her heart, she opened up her home for me to potentially come and stay to make sure that I'm close to the school. Everything can be a little more convenient for my situation. So I said, well, let me talk to my mom about it. And she's going through recovery. And my mom agrees that temporarily that would be fine. And I get my stuff, and I end up moving into that home. And when so it was like a couple months in, everything was going great. I still kept to my schedule. I was going to football. I was going to school. I didn't have like an allowance coming in anymore, so I had to go get a job. Now, while I was doing that, Jonathan and we maintained a close friendship because he was like, I was living under the same roof as him. He's already my friend. So now it felt like he was like my brother that I lived with, right?
Yeah.
I started seeing Jonathan take a turn for the worst. More so drugs and entertaining and bringing people over that shouldn't be over. He shouldn't really be hanging out with them. I know who they are, what they do, and what they sell. And I remember having a talk with him. I said, "Hey man, what are you doing? Who are these people coming over?" He says, "Well, Don't worry about it. You know, he's doing that standoffish thing. I'm starting to see this like darkness come over him. I'm like, what's going on, man? So I was like, okay, well, I gotta keep focused on what I'm doing. And so I moved forward, and then there was one time about 6-7 months in, I just hear this big commotion. I was upstairs getting ready for school, and it was early morning, and they found, you know, his mom finds a huge sandwich bag of weed in his backpack. And you know, I go downstairs, and next thing you know, she's, you know, beating him and going on and on and on, and she's like, Greg, go to school. Jonathan's staying home today. I was like, okay, man. And then when that happened, that's when I started feeling really uncomfortable living in that home, because I've got all these things going for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember like texting my mom. I said, Mom, are you available to talk? I wanna call you and talk about something. And I call her after school on my way to work, and I was like, hey, I don't want to live here anymore. I just don't want to live here. It's not where I need to be. I feel like something bad can happen here, and it can disrupt my future. And you know, I wanna go do things, and I want to take care of you and Dad, and you know, and I can't be here anymore. She says, well, just give it a few more months, and I'll be well enough, and you can come home. So
Was she in the hospital at this point, or?
she was still in recovery. Yeah. She was still in a rehab center.
Okay.
And so I would spend time going to go see her as well, and family would. My brothers was very involved as well. So it just wasn't like me, you know, fully dependently just, you know, helping her. And so she said, you know, I'll be home in a few months. I'm getting better. I was like, good. Okay. And so she finally does come home. And at that point, when she does come home, it's going into my like going into the summer between my junior and my senior year. So my junior year is finishing up, and I had already had 4 Division I full ride scholarships to go play at like Texas State University, North Texas, UTSA, Rice University, just all these Texas schools. And like, I was really hoping UT would come knocking, because I'm big. You know, I bleed burnt orange.
Yeah, being from Austin, right?
Being from Austin, bleed burnt orange. It's my team, man, you know? And so, but they were writing me letters.
It is the best college football team in all of college, by the way.
It is the best college football team. They're going to run the SEC this coming up season. Can't wait. Yep. And so, but man, I was really hoping, and I was really like, man, you don't get it. Nobody does. Is that like, I was a starter in my junior year, and we were coming in to be top 5. At my junior year, we were the top 5 best high school football team in the state of Texas. At one point, for a few weeks straight, we were the number 1 defense in all the state of Texas. And so I was so locked in, dude. Like, going into my junior year, or going to my senior year, I had already moved out of Shama and Jonathan's house, and my mom said she was okay. And at that point, I knew Jonathan was messing with some heavy narcotics, heavy substances. Xanax bars, Molly, X, all this different stuff. He was messing with it, and he was selling it. And now I was living with my mom, and now we go into the point, the series of event that completely derailed my life. I get a call from my brother, in the summertime, as I was getting out of Champions course, and he says there's an accusation that has happened at the daycare at Shama's house. I was like, wow, really? What's the accusation? And he says, well, it has your name in it. What do you mean? What's the accusation? And I haven't been over there in months. Well, there's a dad there, and he's really mad, and he's saying that you did something to his child. I said, what? Okay, well, like, I'm heading over there right now. That's nothing to play with. What do you mean? I haven't been there in months. How could I have done anything to anybody? Well, he says, no. My brother's like, I'm going there. Shama called me, and I'm going to go there. I'm going to see what's going on. The dad's extremely angry, super livid, extremely pissed, and rightfully so. I mean, if my child is coming to me saying that something had happened to him in a place that you've given trust to take care of your child, then rightfully so. Now, absolutely, this guy is saying, like, where's Greg at? Well, it just so happens that the child had said my first name, and he's assuming that's me, right? And, you know, anybody would. And so my brother's like, don't come over here. I'm talking to him. Go home, go to mom. We'll get this all straightened out. This is a big misunderstanding. I said, absolutely, it's a big misunderstanding, and I want to go and confront it. Like, if I'm being accused of it, I'm going to go and confront it. This is nothing to be serious about, because my heart is in my freaking stomach. I've watched enough documentaries on Netflix of wrongful convictions to understand that this is very real and it can happen to people. And this is how it starts. And so I go home and, I'm just like, okay, this is not happening. This is going to get straightened out. It's probably a joke. All right. Well, my brother ends up calling me while we're at the restaurant, and this is summertime of 2013. And he says, hey, we got the dad is going to go to the police. This is 2 weeks later after I get accused of this. My brother's like, hey, we need to get an attorney. And I was like, I don't need an attorney. Like, I didn't do anything. Why? Attorneys defend people that did something. And he's like, no, attorneys defend you. And we need some defense right now. Well, how do we even get one? I don't know how to get one. I don't live a life of knowing how to get one. Do we go to the phone book? Do we look at a billboard? Like, where do we get one? And he says, well, Shama is recommending this attorney that used to represent her older sons. So we go meet with this attorney called Patricia Cummings, and she has all the plaques on the walls, right, of being a super attorney, this and that. So it's really nice to see when you're about to hire somebody to defend you in something so gross and just disgusting. And so talk to her. She says, this is probably nothing. This is procedure. Police are going to have to investigate. So good. Like, let's get an investigation started and let's get this cleared up so I can move on. What do I do, like, right now? She said, well, just continue to live life. There's no warrant out for your arrest. Continue to live life. Like, go to school, go to practice, go be the captain of the champions course, and go and do what you do. Okay, I'll try. This is bugging me. And so I go and I get out of, about 2 weeks goes by, and I get out of champions course again. And my brother says, go into Patricia's office. She wants to speak with you. So I immediately go and take the drive to Patricia's office, which is 15 minutes away from the high school. I sit down in her office, and she looks at me. She said, there's a warrant out for your arrest. What does that mean? Am I getting arrested? She said, yes, you're going to get arrested, but tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. you need to go into the Williamson County Jail and turn yourself in. I'm not turning myself in. I didn't do it. That would show that I'm guilty, wouldn't it? Like, no, I didn't do it. I'm not going to turn myself in. No, that's procedure, Greg. Like, when there's a warrant out for your arrest, it doesn't matter where you're at. The school, work, anywhere. They'll come and get you. And so I leave her office crying, and I call my mom, and I said, Mom, can you just come and meet me? I can't even drive home right now. And so she comes. She's like, I'll be right there. Where do you want to go? I said, just meet me over here at this Chinese buffet place. I'll be sitting in the parking lot. And my mom meets me, and I get out of my car, and I go into hers, and I sit there, and I just put my head down, and I start weeping. And my mom just, like, gets out of the car and walks around and opens my door and starts holding me. And she starts praying over me. And, she starts calling out to the name of Jesus over me. And I remember like it was yesterday. And, my mom just kept, kissing my forehead, saying, we're going to get this all straightened out. Everything's going to be okay. And so I go home, and I change my clothes, and I immediately go to bed because I'm just emotionally just drained. And I wake up at 4 a.m. to get ready to go and turn myself in at 6:30 in the morning. And, It's probably one of the hardest things I ever had to do. And at that point too, I mean, and I'll say this later on in the podcast too, and I'll just reiterate this over and over again. How do you expect an 18-year-old, not even 18 yet, to go and make those life decisions without actually living a life where you can develop in that type of wisdom to be able to make decisions to go and do that? And so I do it, and I go in there, and my mom will forever remember, and I'll remember, and we talk about this. We actually talked about it a few weeks ago. And I asked my mom, what do you remember the most out of everything we went through? Because I'm writing my book, and I'm trying to get as much information as I can. And she said, I'll forever remember the clicking of the handcuffs that they put on you when you turn yourself in. And I said, I remember that too, but I remember that during trial. And we'll go into that too.
Yeah, what are you feeling in this moment? Like, I can only imagine. It's like, obviously, you'd be scared, worry, anxiety, anything and everything that's a negative emotion. Like,
Yeah.
What are you even trying to tell yourself in this moment?
Man, I really wasn't. I didn't know what I was telling myself other than, like, in those moments. And I guess I can make this a testament to my parents, is that they've always been very positive, and like trying to see the positive out of things, and shift your perspective on like maintaining hope and faith that everything is going to be okay. But it's the ones who can endure. It's the ones who can endure and long suffer that will yield the fruits of that, right? It's the ones who won't give up. And so I'll go into that jail that morning, and it takes 13 hours, and I know what I'm being accused of, and I know what the judge is about to say to me of what my charge is, which is, at that point, it was aggravated sexual assault of a child. Now, I know a lot of inmates are going to be watching this, and I know a lot of people that have been in prison are going to be watching this. And I lived it. I lived in a place where I was labeled that, in jail and in prison. And a lot of these inmates that have been on the tougher units can agree that life expectancy for a child molester is not years, it's days. So I've watched enough documentaries of penitentiaries that I am absolutely scared to death to go into this jail, being charged with that. I sat in booking, and within hours, my mugshot and my charge was on the TV in the booking, and I'm sitting there, and immediately everybody's looking up at the TV, and there's like a whole booking area of 30 people, and they're looking at me and looking at the TV, and just looks of disgust. And I'm sitting there, and the whole time in my head, I'm just thinking, everybody's got it wrong. I'm not that. But then again, it's out of my control. So what do you do? Immediately, the police officer grabs me and puts me in like a holding cell, so nothing can happen to me. Then several hours later, I get bonded out. It was a $50,000 bond. Family came together and put it up, and it took like 13 hours from the time I walked in to the time I walked out. And I remember my brother coming to pick me up, and he got out of the car, and he grabbed the back of my head and brought me in. And he's just like, it's no words, you can't say anything other than just be there and hug somebody. So we got in the car, and then, to keep a long story short, it was then a year of absolutely nothing when it came to an investigation. And then my whole life, just things started getting stripped away from me, man. My Division I scholarships, once that was out in the public and it was formal that I was charged with this, all my scholarships stripped. I got kicked out of my school district. I couldn't go to school. I went to a JJAEP to finish off my senior year. This is all happening this was going into my senior year. Finished off at the JJAEP. I decided to graduate early because I didn't want to be there anymore in juvie, and then I started working with my uncle. He did landscaping as well, so I started working with him to make extra money. Live with my brother, who lived, off in the middle of nowhere. So I had to pretty much detach myself from society. I had to, I paused and deactivated my social media accounts because, man, the internet's a world inside of a world. It's so nasty, the things that people were saying about me. I had lost a lot of people who I thought were my friends, that turned their back on me, that have turned to social media to talk crap about me. And thank God for the ones who did believe in me. There was a handful of them. And now, if I can shift over to another perspective and lens, my girlfriend at the time had decided to stay with me. For years, we dated each other, and she got to know who I was. And there was a time where when I was accused, and before we went to the LA trip that I was talking about, I needed to talk to somebody and tell them what I was going through, because I couldn't keep it in here anymore. The first person I thought about talking to was her dad. And so I went straight to the house. I called him, actually. I said, David, do you have some time? He was the leadership coach. That year, coming into my senior year, I was supposed to take his class. So he was extremely excited for it because I was dating his daughter, and I was excited for it because I was dating his daughter. Mm-hmm. And I call him up. I said, I need to talk to you about something. And I immediately go to him, and I sit down with him. I said, this is what I'm going through. And I don't know why I did it. Like, the last person you would want to know what you're going through is the man who is judging every little move you make because you're dating his daughter.
Yeah.
And that you want to make proud, and you want to, but I did because I knew that he was a leadership coach and he could teach me on how to get through this. And I did. And he looked at me in the eye. He said, hey, is there any way that this accusation could have came about? I said, no, none at all. And he immediately says, Greg, I don't know why this is happening to you, but I know there's a God that's bigger than all of this. And I needed to hear that. I really did. Like, if I didn't see it at that time, but I heard it, and he told me. And, and at that moment, you could have a dialect with God where you're asking, why is this happening to me? Or you can immediately, maybe this has to do with spiritual wisdom. You can ask yourself, you can shift from why is this happening to me to what is God trying to show me here? Mm-hmm. And it takes spiritual wisdom to get to that point of that discernment, to shift that lens from pain into, like, what's the purpose? I didn't have that. I was looking at the pain 100% the whole time, wallowing in it. Now, time goes on. 10 months later, I get a call from my attorney. She said, you're getting indicted. I didn't know what that meant. What's indicted? Well, it means that a grand jury has declared that you need to go stand trial. There's enough evidence, apparently, that you need to stand trial. There was no evidence. It's just kind of a formality, right? I when she told me this, that I was getting indicted, it didn't hit real with me. First, what that meant is that a trial means that you go in a courtroom, and essentially you sit in a room, and they're going to essentially figure out if your fate's going to be, you didn't do it, or you're going to prison. So we started preparing for that. As much as I couldn't believe that we're getting to this point, I asked Patricia, what are they standing on? What are they standing on? Like, what do they say they have that I did? And she says, well, in this specific case, you don't need anything other than the accusation of the victim. As long as they said your name, you're going to stand in that courtroom, and it's going to be either their testimony or yours that's going to either exonerate you or find you guilty. I thought that was pretty messed up. Being the subject, me, who's trying to fight for my life here, I said, is there any other way? Is there any other way? Like, who do I need to talk to? I hadn't been talked to by the police yet. The detective never talked to the police. I had found out right before trial that the detective, Chris Daly, never had went to the crime scene, never took pictures, didn't interview any other people in the home, didn't interview me, didn't seek out. Oh, and by the way, he walked into and I'm just talking about the investigation, but he walked into the interview center where the child apparently was given their outcry. He walked in and the child wasn't actually like saying it happened, but when he walked in and asked very open-ended or non-open-ended questions, apparently now the kid is saying yes, 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 and that's all he's saying, yes, 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 and that was enough for him to go and get a warrant for my arrest. So that's just kind of tidbits of the investigation or lack thereof, but that's what they were going with going into trial, and I'm sitting there, about to enter this series of events in my life where the next 7 days, it's a circus show, man. It's a circus show. Like the trial should have been, I was found not guilty, but the education in our justice system is so important when it comes to judicial trials and stuff like that, because jurors, people like you, me, anybody who gets a slip in the mail that gets commissioned to go and sit in a box and follow these instructions to ultimately have somebody's fate in your hands, having that burden is very, very, very huge. Because you're the judgment, right? And I go into trial, everything's looking good. At the end of the trial, there's deliberations, and I'm fully expecting my life to go back to normal. I thought everything was going great. And before I go into that, I want to talk about the prosecutors in my case. They're pretty much disgraced after the documentary that was shown about my case. None of them take accountability or responsibility for the things they've done. That's on them. But before trial, there's a thing called jury selection, right? And there's a big panel of like 100 potential jurors that could sit in that box and judge you. And so they're in jury selection. The prosecutor and the defense get up and they try to weed out who's going to be a good potential candidate to be one of the few jurors. And so the prosecutor, he got up, put on a teleprompter, and showed two pictures in front of 100 people and said, this is Greg Kelley. He's the defendant about to stand trial for this crime. And I want to go ahead and show you. And at the time, I was very fit. I was going to the gym. I had taken care of myself. I looked young, right? Showed a picture of Ted Bundy next to my mugshot. And I don't know how you're allowed to do this, but he said, the person on the left is Ted Bundy, who's an infamous serial killer and one of the most notorious ones in all of American history. And he did all these things to these women, and terrible person. And to the right is Greg Kelley. Don't let looks deceive you. Greg Kelley is fully capable of doing what Ted Bundy did. That's what he said. That will forever ring true to me, ring in my head, because he compared me to a serial killer. And I don't know how you're able to do that, because now it's up to the jury to believe it or not. And I looked back in disgust. I looked at my attorney and I was like, how are they able to do this? And I looked back and the jury looked like they bought it. And I said, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm getting into here. And now I go into trial, and that's when the deliberation happens, right? And there was no evidence to actually go past the burden of proof that I actually did this. And I took the stand. I looked at the jury and I said, I did not do this. And I don't know why this is happening to me, and I ask you just to please believe me. And they just looked at me, looked down, and now they go out to deliberation, and they deliberate for like 10 hours. When they're deliberating, it's like a hung jury. They don't know. There's like some not guilty, some guilty. And on our end, all I'm doing is sitting around with my family waiting to know if I get my life back or not. Nerves are at an all-time high. And I get it's like 10 o'clock at night. And it's been like 13 hours. And the judge says, I'm going to bring the jury back in, give them one last instruction. And everybody and their mother who was supporting me was there, right? Tons of people. They were waiting there all week, all day. There's a verdict. It's like nothing but 5 minutes later. I'm just, heart's pounding. I walk back in, and my attorney says, okay, let's go do this. And go in there, and it's so quiet. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. And I stand at the table, and the prosecutors are on that one, judge is up there, and the whole courtroom's packed. The jury walks in, and right behind the jury, there's three sheriff deputies that walk right behind them over to my table. And I don't know how I recognized this, but I did. And I look at my attorney, and she looks back at me with this look of worry. And I'm worried too, because I'm thinking the same thing she's thinking. Mm-hmm. It's that, why would they put county or deputies right next to me if I would be deemed not guilty? They wouldn't. And at that moment, I just felt my world come crashing down, that this is about to happen. And I don't know what came into me, but I was fighting the urge of turning around and running, because I'm about to be found guilty right now. And a couple minutes later goes by, and he reads off a paper that says, we the jury on defendant Gregory Kelley guilty. And you see it on the documentary, they've got footage of it, but my head collapses, and I put my head on the table, and I'm like slowly banging my head against the table, repeatedly saying, I didn't do this, I didn't do this, I didn't do this. And I look up at the jury, like, what have you done to me? And they can't look at me. They can't look at me. And then I get up, and the sheriffs they got my arms, and they're walking me around the table to the judge, and I immediately look at the prosecutors, and they won't look at me either. They're looking straight ahead. And this prosecutor has the biggest smirk on his face, biggest smile on his face, like he had done the world good. And put this guy behind bars, and go to the judge, and they said, we're going to put you in another courtroom. And I go to another courtroom to be with my family, and I'm supposed to give them their one last hug goodbye. And I get rushed to, everybody's screaming in the courtroom. I mean, everybody's yelling, everybody's weeping. Like, how is this happening? And people have asked me, what were the emotions going through in your head at that moment? Well, for me, it felt like my world was coming to an end. And I think for my family and my friends, it's like they just witnessed their family member just get murdered right in front of them. Mm-hmm. That was the noises that were coming out of them. So I get sent over to the next courtroom to say goodbye to my family, and I get immediately rushed off into the Williamson County Jail, and I get put into a medical cell. Put me in a medical cell because apparently they thought I was suicidal. I wasn't. I was just emotionally and heartbroken, And the next day I had to come back for sentencing. I come back for sentencing, and I'm detailing all this out because I'm trying to share with you on how broken our system is when it comes to deals and plea bargains and all that. And there's really no seeking the truth. Very rarely. I can't say that they don't always seek the truth, but it's very rare to seek the truth in a county that has a 98% conviction rate. That would mean that 98% of cases that get put across a detective or a prosecutor's desk is going to be convicted. That's not right, because the new data today shows that between 5 to 7% of individuals in prison right now could be fully innocent. 5 to 7%, that's a big amount. If you're talking about 1 million, You're talking about 50 to 70,000 people in prison right now that could be potentially innocent.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. And when we have counties that have 98% conviction rates, you kind of understand it. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I see how now, right? And so my county had a 98% conviction rate. And they said like 92% of them, of the 98, were plea bargain deals. Well, I was offered a plea bargain before my trial. They offered me 5 years probation just to go up there and declare to the whole world and my family that I did this. And I'll tell you a story about why I said no. Because whenever I was in high school, going in my sophomore year, I had done something stupid with some friends, and I almost would have gotten arrested. I had stolen some like $50 shoes from Kohl's, had swapped them out with mine. Didn't really come from much, so couldn't really afford them. But I swapped them out, got caught on camera, and they held us outside of a Kohl's department store, and the police officer was saying, I could send you to jail right now, but you look like a good young man. Where's your dad at? Well, my dad shows up, talks to the police officer, and he tells me, he says, if I ever see you again, then I will take you to jail. And my dad talked him out of it. And he said, I'll handle him. He's a good kid. He's got football opportunities. This is not him. And the police officer let me go. And I remember getting in the car, and I'm driving off. We're driving home. My dad had looked at me in the car with disgust and just like, son, I'm just gonna tell you one thing right now. You're gonna have to decide really quick what type of man you want to be in this world, because you're about to become a man. You're gonna be a man who does that, or you're gonna be a man who stands for the truth. And the truth is that a man is a person who says who says what he's gonna do, how he's gonna do it, and the time it needs to get done, and a person who absolutely does the right thing. Okay. Now, whenever I get offered this is years later, of course, and I'm going through the toughest situation. I call this a man moment. Because if you ask me at what point did I feel like a man moment for me, it was when I got offered that plea bargain by the prosecutors. And I asked to go to the restroom because I saw my mom crying, and my mom was telling me, think about maybe taking it because, my mom's Hispanic. She said, mijo, they could do something to you in there if everything goes wrong. So I have to go be alone for a second, and I go to the bathroom in the courthouse, and I stand in front of a mirror, and I'm washing my hands, and I see my dad looking at me back in the mirror. And I just visualize him saying, what type of man you're going to be in this world. And I remember like looking back at him and said, the one that fights for truth. And if I go and accept a plea bargain, I'll go in front of a courtroom of all my loved ones in the world and say something I didn't do that wouldn't be true. But sometimes fighting for the truth is not fair. It's not. Sometimes the end goal is not fair. And sometimes it's really hard because the consequences of fighting for truth sometimes could be death. And if I get found convicted and I go to prison, I could die. What kind of man do you want to be in this world, though? And so I was faced with a really tough situation. I said no. No matter the cost. Well, I end up losing. I get found guilty. And the next day, whenever I get sentenced, I get put into a holding room with my family. And before I go out to sentencing, and man, state prosecutions, man, they love to try to make a deal with you. They come up with a deal that if my hands are already tied behind my back, I'm convicted. They try to make a deal with you. If you waive your right to appeal this trial, then you will be sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison, and you won't have the potential of getting 25 to 99. And I remember specifically when my attorney had told me this. She had said, you can either take this 25 with this look of almost like you should take it, or give it back to the jury that just convicted you, and they can give you between 25 to 99, any number in between. I see my brothers, I see my mom looking back at me, and my dad couldn't be there. It would kill him. He was still recovering, and I look at my family, and I remember telling my brothers, I can't make this decision anymore. I can't make decisions. I want you to choose. So they do, and my brother was like, well, we're going to pick the one that we could have the possibility of potentially seeing you again one day. And that would be when I'm 44, is when I would be released from prison, if I had served all 25 years. And they had decided. I said, whatever you guys decide. My life's over. It's over. And can't control it. Just got to do the best I can. So they decide 25. I get sentenced. Say goodbye to my family one more time. I kind of salute a kiss to my friends, everybody that was in that courtroom that sat there in the sentencing. And off I go to the penitentiary. That was the. Now we can go.
What's your thoughts then? Like, obviously, you said my life's over. Like, I think that would be probably any normal person's thought.
Yeah.
Like, as you're out that ride to the penitentiary, like, what's going through your mind?
I am terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I go into the county jail. I'm in the county jail for 30 days. And in the county jail was just a wild ride, man, because I got put into like a medical cell. I got put into like segregation. I got put into like a medical pod at one point, and like the chief over the jail, she was a wonderful lady. She didn't care about like if I was guilty or not guilty. She treated everybody the same, and I saw that on how she treated other inmates. Right? That, I mean, I wouldn't let near my family with a 100-foot stick, and she still treated them the same, just with love and compassion, and always asked, "Do you need anything?" You know, and so she was really nice, and so she had asked me, "Do you need anything?" I said, "I want to get out of this freaking cell," and I was in a cell for 23 hours in, 1 hour out. I said, "I need to get out of this cell, ma'am. I'm going crazy in here." And she says, "Well, let me see what I can do." So she puts me in this medical pod. And it's with like And
when you say that you were in 23 hours out one, like, is that just like normal intake? Was that based on the fact that the classification of your crime? Like, why were you in that cell?
Second one, it was classified. I was classified as I needed to be protective custody because I was all over the news. I was a football player. I was all state. I was, they loved those type of stories, right? Football player convicted, child molester, predator, this and that, right? Painting me out to be a monster. And so other inmates, what do they do in jail? They watch the news. So they all knew what I was in there for. And so she had done some research, and this medical pod that had like 8 people in it, all with like cases like mine. And I was really weary about that because I don't want to spend time with people that are like that, And so I do, and it turned out not to be too bad, but it was a little more freedom. But to talk about my faith in that situation, there was a lot of angry talks with God at that moment, and talks that I try to wrestle with, understanding that I won't have to answer them to this day, but my flesh gets in the way, and sometimes I'm like, I wonder if God will ever bring that up, the way I talk to him in that specific moment. And I know I'm covered with the blood of Jesus, and but man, I was just so angry. I could have went one way or the other. In reality, I could have been an angry atheist, and I don't think I would be here today on this podcast if I became one. I feel like I would probably still be in prison because I would do something that would potentially get me more time outside of outside of even maybe being exonerated. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have met my spiritual fathers who have took me under the wing. There's this whole thing, plethora of what ifs, right? But I made a decision after something really weird happened to me while I was in prison. And it was whenever it was like the last day I was in my medical cell, and this guard had come by giving me my bare necessities. And I had done a sermon about this at a church one time called Bare Necessities. And like when all the fluff gets taken out of your life is when you hear God the most. Like Instagram gets taken out, Netflix gets taken out, even your friendships, right? Toxic or not toxic, gets taken out. Work gets taken out, movies gets taken out, and all you're left with is your soul, clothes. That's it. And the guard came by, doing his rounds, opened up the bean chute, gave me my bare necessities. And all you inmates, you know what I'm talking about here, is they give you that blanket, the clothes, the toothpaste, the bar of soap, a couple of your toiletries, and they dropped in a Bible. And I remember the guard saying, all right, Greg, here's your necessities, right? Okay. I had never gotten the Bible before as a necessity, but for some reason this jailer thought it was a necessity. And so I picked up all my stuff, and I didn't think of anything. I didn't think of it as anything at the time. I picked it up, put it on my bunk, but I went over to brush my teeth, and I had like brushing my teeth, and I looked back on my bunk, and I looked down at the book, and I was just like, started chuckling. I was like, bare necessities. Why would this be a necessity, right? And I picked it up. I mean, I got nothing else to do. I sit down on the bunk and I pick it up. I crack open the Bible. I start reading, and I was like, man, this is so confusing. You know, it's so big. I don't know where to start if I want to read this. And so I started reading Genesis, and bad idea. I remember like I was reading, and there was this one trustee who would always like come around, and I knew he was a man of faith because he would always like talk about God and you know, trying to give me a word of encouragement. He knew what I was going through. I don't know if he believed I did it or didn't do it. I don't know, but he was always very encouraging. And this was an inmate, and I had been reading the Bible, and he says, "What are you reading?" I was like, "I don't know, man. Like I'm starting in Genesis," and he says, "Oh man," he says, "This is your first time?" Yeah, he's like, "Man, start in Matthew. Like start in Matthew, get to know Jesus, get to know what he came here for, get to know what he did, why he did it, who his family was, what his mission was, who he impacted. Get to know him." I was like, all right, I'll start reading in Matthew. So I read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then I go into Paul's epistles, and then I go into the letters, and I go into, I read the whole New Testament. Okay, I get that now. And then he's like, then read the Old Testament, read the history of Jesus, right? His whole lineage. And it'll make more sense. It's the history book of the New Testament. Cool. So I did. And then that's when I got moved up to the medical pod, and I continued to read. And even though with the storm I was going through, the first sense of peace I had felt in about a month was when I was reading the Word of God. Mm-hmm. It was I guess it's that thing where God's, it says that it's the peace that surpasses all understanding. You just can't understand it. But it's like whenever you're in there, man, the Holy Spirit just kind of just spends some time with you a little bit, and put your heart at rest for a second. And when I closed it, next thing you know, you put on the TV. That's the next negative thing you can start looking at, and that would just throw all that out of proportion. And I'd go back to my cell, and I'd be at peace again a little bit. And I was like, oh man, this is probably what I need to do in order to maintain this, right? Is to maintain this little sense of peace that I have. And I stopped thinking about being in a place I shouldn't be in, and my new life circumstance and all that. So time goes on, I get sent to the penitentiary, and the penitentiary is we'll go to the WIN unit in Huntsville, Texas, maximum security. And it was tough, man. It was tough. My first day, I had to defend myself. And I was young. I'm white Hispanic mix, but I look more white. So prison's full of racism. Not all. And there's there's a lot of seasoned people in there that did time in the 90s and in the 80s that are now older in their 50s and 60s, and they're more like Cadillac, laid back, more welcoming, right? And I had started making a lot more friends in my that were 40, 50, and 60 years old, because the people that were 18, 19-year-old, they were crash dummies, man. They just wanted to fight and do drugs and do stuff I'm not trying to do. And so when I was at the unit, I had to defend myself. I had something called a heart check, and it's every new person has to fight and figure out what you're made of and if you're going to stand your ground, and it sucks. But it's over with. They don't really beat up your face or anything. They beat up your body to see if you're going to catch out and call a guard and go. And I didn't. I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to go back into a 23-hour in, 1-hour out cell, no matter what. We get called to the lieutenant's office, and lieutenant, the person who was attacking me and the lieutenant and me were in the same office, and the lieutenant was like, they saw what I was in there for. It was like, oh, I get it, And so I didn't go to SEG. The other person did. So I get put back into the block, and from there, really, the heart check is going to show like if you're going to be labeled, try to keep it PG, but a bitch, and that's kind of how it is in prison. And I didn't want to be labeled that, because I wanted to control at least where I was, and I felt like that bought a little bit of respect, that I would still fight. And it sucks because you have to conform to that world in order to live in it. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't going to be my identity, though. Like, I wasn't going to continue to do that. So what I did was I immediately signed up for college. I got into college. I immediately signed up to go to a couple chapel classes. I was simply trying to find a new identity, because the one that I was a football player before was stripped from me, and now I'm just like this void. Like, I don't know what I am. So I'm starting to tap into new skill sets, like welding, carpentry. I started taking college classes. Then I started taking chapel classes. And that's when I started getting filled up with my identity of Christ in my life. And I had a lot of questions. And the biggest one was, why am I here?
Yeah.
Why am I here? And I asked that for a long time. And the moment that I stopped asking, why am I here, and start living with, okay, I want to know everything you're trying to show me here, God. Like, I believe in you. Like, I don't want to not believe in you. I have a feeling that you're there, but I need you more than anything right now. I need you more than ever. And that's when I got into chapel classes. I put in for the 5 dorm, which is a faith-based dorm, and that's where I met Reggie. And Reggie was a facilitator, Reginald Hicks, and he's like my spiritual father, man. He had already been down for 20 some odd years, and he was the type of guy, man, that would make sure that you're always doing okay, would check on you, so intentional with what he did. And I figured out really quick what it meant to live with the fruits of the Spirit, is when you know that their intention is to love people rather than trying to get something from them. There's no attachment. Like, there's no strings attached. And so people like him, I got to hang out with a lot. And while all this was going on, I was still fighting my case. And there was a time where this newspaper came out, and I got rejected by a court of criminal appeals, one of the smaller courts. And it was just a stepping stone to the next court. But the newspaper made a big deal about it. And I had already been about 2 years in, and I was on a cell block called C2, which was there was a lot of it was weird, man. There was a lot of like homosexual activity happening on it. There was a lot of really weird, sketchy people that just lived a life of perversion, a lot of pornography going here and there, and it was really uncomfortable to even be in the day room. But whenever you would go somewhere, you would have to go into the day room, then they would get you from the day room to go out, right? So I remember one time I was coming back from work, and one of my friends was on there on the block, and he wasn't there. I usually catch up with him in the day room. But I sat down, and one of the guys came up to me. He was like, hey, he's like, did you know that you're in the paper? You're in the Austin paper. And even though I was in Houston, somebody still got the Austin paper. Well, my case was on there showing that I got denied in this specific court. And it had like my charge on there. And at that time, many people didn't know I was in there for. Well, this man, I was sitting on the bench. This man walked up to me with the paper in his hand, showed it to me. And I know who this man is, and I know what type of life he leads. It's one that, it's pretty disgusting, to say the least. And he sits down next to me, shows me the paper, and he looks at me in the eyes, and he says, "Man, nobody really understands us." I look back at him in his eyes, and I see nothing but darkness and soullessness. And I said, "I'm nothing like you." At that moment, he was a child predator. And at that moment, I get up, and there's another form of rage stewing inside of me as I'm walking back to my cell, and I'm crying because I'm like, it's a never-ending nightmare I'm going through still. And yeah, I had to fight that every day, man. Sitting in jail, in prison, being told something I'm not. And there was times where I wish God wouldn't wake me up. I was too scared to take my own life. My cellmate had taken his own life. He was in there with the same charge I was in there for, but he ended up taking his own life. And it was a tough situation, man. And I got a year later goes by, and I get a call. All right, and this is it's weird how this happens. But while everything's getting stripped from me again, right, while I was in prison, there's this new law policy that comes by saying sex offenders can't go to college. And I was already like 3 years deep into college, and that was just stripped from me. And so I was very depressed at that moment, because that was like the door of knowledge that I could escape from in prison. I still had church, which I was grateful for, but I'd love to go into college and learning. I couldn't do it anymore. But a week later, I get a call saying that my case was getting reopened by the new DA of Williamson County. The old one had proven herself to be ineffective, and she had been charged and convicted of multiple instances where she's withheld evidence in murder trials. She got disbarred. Name was Jana Duty. Well, the spot was vacant. New guy came in, chose to reopen my case after my attorney had came in and showed him all my evidence of innocence. Well, I get a call and saying that my case is getting reopened. The Texas Rangers are going to take the investigation, and we're going to finally get down to the truth. And get a call about a month later by a Texas Ranger to come interview me. He did. And then, 2 months after that, I get a call from my attorney that rushed me to this attorney room, and he says, "Hey, there's a squad car coming to pick you up right now. It just got rained down right now by the judge, and we got yourself an evidentiary innocence hearing," which is it's a habeas hearing where it's just literally like a mini trial. 3 days, present new evidence of fact, right, of innocence that could potentially exonerate or show Greg Kelley's innocence. The DA had approved it, and my attorney had approved it, and so the judge had approved it. So we're gonna get our second time in court now, not a trial, just a hearing. So I get rushed. It's weird, man. I get rushed to like pack up my stuff. Squad car is going to be there in a few hours. And next thing you know, I'm waiting for the squad car. They walk me out the front door, and all my friends and all the guys that were in the faith-based dorm with me that I was currently in, where I was spending time with Reggie and all those guys, they were all cheering for me, man, as I was walking out. And I wasn't free, but I was about to go fight for my freedom now.
And just to clarify, you said that you had given up your right to appeal the case?
I had given up my right to appeal the trial. So during the appeal process, anything that would come forward need to be new evidence of my innocence, not like anything in trial, which what's crazy is there was very little of. Now, I'll talk about the evidence that came forth after trial, which was the evidence that the Cedar Park Police Department, the original detective, should have gotten, that the Texas Rangers got, and my attorneys had to get through private investigation, which was the forensic dissection of my phone. My phone would have proved that I was never even there, that I wasn't even in the home when this took place. I had moved out, like I told you, moved out months prior to this incident even happening.
Wow.
And that the characteristics of the place that it had happened, the trophies, right? The room with the trophies, the room with the cowboy stuff, the room with this, that's all describing Jonathan McCarty's room. But my first name is being put in it. And then the cherry on top was Jonathan and I looked very similar, as if he would be my little brother. And there's witness of people saying that they've gotten us confused. The news outlets have gotten us confused before with our football mugshots. So none of this was taken into account, right, during the investigation. And then on top of that, there was multiple witnesses of that came forward and wrote affidavits that Jonathan had confessed to them at parties while he was drunk and high on drugs, that he should be the one in prison, not Greg. So all this is just coming out after the trial, right? And so that's what my attorney had. And well, I get a hearing, and the hearing happens, and I end up getting transferred over, and it's just so wild, man, because I get transferred back to the county, back to the pod that I was in, and the guy 3 years later, half of the guys are still there. What? Like, are you serious? Wait, you still here? He's like,
Yeah.
He's like, no, I left and I came back. I was like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
Like, I'm over here like I just did 3 years in the penitentiary, and you're still in county jail. No, it was just a weird situation. And then the sheriff Chody at the time, he had let me see my family for as long as I wanted to, because now my case is getting better light put upon it. Instead of me being painted out to be a monster, these news outlets are trying to play quality control now. Like, holy crap, all this crap we said about Greg Kelley, it could not be true. I got to hug my mom. My mom got to bring some home cooked dinner. I mean, man, it was amazing. Got to hug my girlfriend. She had flown down from LA, and that hearing was the hearing where the truth came. I mean, and talk about the Holy Spirit showing up and showing out. It was just, it was the most paradoxical thing you could ever have in your life. It was a twilight zone, because the DA and my defense attorney seemed like they were both on my side, and they were trying to convince this judge that, like, yes, the DAs were like, we got it wrong. This county got it wrong. We need to make this right. This is how they got it wrong. And then my defense attorney, of course, Keith Hampton, my appeal attorney, was just like, yep, this is how they got it wrong, though, you know. And Judge Donna King, nothing but utmost respect for her. She's still prevalent in my life today. I had just talked to her a few days ago. She checks in on me all the time. Talk about a judge, a woman after God's own heart. She's a devout Christian mother. She's been a judge for the district court of Williamson County for a long time. And this was the first time she was ever handling a potentially innocent person after the fact of conviction. And so she didn't tell me all this at first, but and I'll tell you this later on, but she felt like she was torn, because she had put so many people away to prison, man. Like, she's giving life sentences out, and she's looking at somebody that's like, did we get it wrong? You know? And it just bugged her. And so the hearing went on 3 days, and everything that was used to convict me, the truth was set free and just debunked all of it. So the time ends up coming, and where 3 days was up, a lot of evidence came out. The judge literally said, I have taken all of this. I appreciate everyone who's been here. The attorneys, Greg Kelley, thank you for being here. I am going to need to go back for a few weeks, look over everything. And the last thing she said, and I'm so glad, and I'll remember this for the rest of my life, she says, this is something I am going to need to pray over. That's what she said. And at that moment, I looked at Keith and I said, we got it, baby. We got it. Because I know for a fact that if she's going to go pray and talk to God about this, God is going to, it talks about, I forgot what book in the Old Testament, but he says that God has the hearts of the judges in his hand, and he can turn it whichever way he wants to. And at that moment, I had read that previously, and I need to brush myself up on where that is again, but at that moment, that's what I was thinking. I was like, all she needs to do is just go and confide in God right now, and in Christ, and I know she will. And after everything had just happened, and she did, and 2 weeks later, man, it was August 22nd, 2017. Today is August 22nd, 2024.
Yeah, wow.
7 years. And August 22nd, 2017. I was just doing my normal routine. I was sitting in my cell, and I had an 8-man cell about the size of this room to myself. And my normal routine every morning was to wake up, do my scripture readings, have my cup of coffee, have my alone time with God, do my workout, ask to go, I asked the guard if I can go out to the cell, to the rec yard at the top of this jail. He would allow me to. I'd go do my 1 hour workout. I'd come back. 10 o'clock, The Price is Right would start. I would get another cup of coffee, watch The Price is Right. And during The Price is Right, there's this, my cell door opens. And it was the sheriff of the county. The sheriff, the big dog of the county, walks in and says, hey, Greg, you have an attorney visit. I'm like, okay, cool, let me get ready. He's like, well, why are you here? Like, why are you? Like, you're a sheriff. Don't you have better things to do? That's what I said. And he says, oh, no, I'm working, and I decided to come do this myself. Okay, cool. And I was like, how's everything going? And he's like, everything's good. And we're just conversating. And he says, I turn around and put my hands in the bean chute, ready to get handcuffed. He's like, oh, you don't need those. You're fine. You're with me. Like, okay. I thought that was weird. That's how institutionalized I guess I am. And so we walk down the hallway, and I go into the attorney room, and I'm waiting there. The sheriff's like right behind the door. I could see him like in the glass. He's just waiting there, looking in the window, like as if like something's gonna happen. And my attorney walks in with a piece of paper, and he like looks at me with a smirk on his face. He says, "How you doing today?" Like, I'm doing okay. And I'm watching The Price is Right now. And Keith was like, "Well, this is probably worth missing The Price is Right." I said, "How's that?" He says, "You're going home."
Wow.
And shows me a piece of paper, puts it against the wall, or puts it against the glass. He says, read that. And it says, the immediate release of Greg Kelley. And, man, it was, wow. It was so surreal. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, when you're like, I call it the desert. I've been in the desert. It's like, I think of like Moses just taking the Israelites through the desert. And, Moses was kind of feeling bad about it sometimes, because he would like plead with God, like, man, these guys won't stop complaining about being in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And they just complain about how long it's taking. And at one point I was complaining, then I stopped complaining, and I felt like God started showing up, and then next thing you know, I feel like I'm going to the promised land. And to me in my desert, I classify the situation I went through as the desert, because the desert is no respecter of person. You can have all the money in the world, you can have all the cars and all the whatever, women, houses, whatever. But in the desert, you either learn to survive or you die. There's two things. That's it. And I felt like I had just stepped out of a desert for a second, and couldn't believe it, because I'm like, I'm getting rescued. Been in here for so long. And so, he says, well, let's go up and grab your stuff, man. I'm like, okay, can you come up with me?
Yeah, I assume that you're probably just like absolutely shocked, don't even know what to do at this point.
No, I was like, how do I?
Paralyzed.
Yeah, I'm paralyzed. I'm emotionally paralyzed. I'm maybe even forgetting how to walk. Like, it's just wow. And then he's like, yeah, let's go up there. And so the sheriff and my attorney go up there. The sheriff was taking pictures of like all of it, and I have them. And it's pretty cool to look back on like the documented of the within 20 minutes of me like going up there, grabbing my stuff, and like I go up to my cell, my attorney's with me, and he's like, well, what do you want to grab? What do you want to grab? I'm like, well, like I got like a bunch of food, I got books, I got a coffee mug, I got clothes, and I was like looking at it, I'm like, put all this stuff in this bag, put this stuff in this bag. And this bag had my Bible, my coffee mug, my prison ID, and that's it. And this bag had all my food, my clothes. And right next to me was an 8-man cell of like 8 people who every day would encourage me while my case was on the news. Like it was on the news every day while I was back in county jail. And they would encourage me. They're like, man, hang in there, Greg. Man, like, you're going to get out, bro. You're going to get your life back. I mean, you're going to have a beautiful family. Like, they're encouraging me. And these are guys facing their own crap, you know? And I was like, man, I appreciate that, guys. Appreciate it, fellas, you know? And it doesn't matter what you've done, dude. Like, people can still be great people, you know? And I grabbed that bag. I was like, all that. I told the sheriff, can you make sure that gets put right in front of their door? And he's like, yeah, I got you. And he grabs it. As I'm walking out, I could see their door right there. And he puts it there. And they're like, oh, man, GK, appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Go out there and go be great, brother. Go be great. All right. And I walk out. And as I'm walking down, my attorney's like, there's a big mob out. Not a mob, but a big gathering outside. I said, why? He's like, oh, there's every media outlet out there. There's your friends, your family. Okay, this is like a big thread, trending thread on Twitter right now.
Yeah.
And like you're live. It's going live right now. I could see it in the TVs of the pods of literally people outside this jail.
Wow.
And my attorney's like briefing me on what's about to happen. And I said, the first thing I said is, where's my family and where's Gabriel? Like I need them to be. I'm not walking out until they're there. And she said, your family's out there. Gabriel's on her way. I said, all right, I'm waiting. Like, I'm waiting. And then she gets a text saying, Gabriel just arrived. I said, well, let's go. And next thing you know, I'm in this little side door of this jail, and that's where everybody's at. And Keith walks. He's like, you ready for this? I said, I'm ready. Let's go. And the door opens. I just see a big ray of light. And I walk towards it. And so bright. I just see it, like all the cameras and the people. And I see Gabriel run up to me, and we embrace. And there's a video on my social media page of it all. And we embrace and we hug and we kiss. And then it started a 2-year wait, dude, of waiting for the highest court of appeals in Texas, the CCA, which is out of Austin, Texas, the Court of Criminal Appeals, to make the final decision if because I wasn't exonerated. My conviction wasn't overturned. I was put out on an appeal bond. Like Judge Donna King signed off saying that I could continue to fight from home because she can't exonerate me. The highest court of Texas has to. But she recommended to the highest court that I would be exonerated because I had surpassed the burden of proof of my innocence after conviction. And so she recommended that, and it took forever. The system's so slow. Took 2 years, and while I was out, I got to just spend time with family. I got to, just imagine if you got out of all that, what would you do? You wouldn't take one day for granted. You would wake up every day wanting to have a slow morning, drink a cup of coffee with your family, and just do what your heart truly desires, man. Forget the money. Forget the getting the job. Forget this. Forget that. Like, to me, I feel like after like a good 1 year of being free, I saw my mom every day. I saw my girlfriend every day. She had moved back from LA, and I saw my friends every day. I sat around and just slowed down for a second and just took in just the beauty of life. I got to go and walk on trails and smell flowers and do all the mushy gushy stuff that nobody does anymore because we're so busy in everyday life. And so I we had to wait for 2 years, and at the time I had gotten a personal training job with a gym owner who had believed in me, and so that's how I was making a little money. And then I had just enjoyed, I worked on my fitness. I just enjoyed living outside of prison, but technically I was still a convicted felon. So it was really hard. I don't have rights still. And for 2 years straight, there was nothing. There was nothing. And it was scary because my case had just about after a year and a half had been the case that had been with the CCA the longest in its history. Like, it's not normal to wait 2 years. It's normal to wait 6 months. It's normal to wait a year, but it's not normal to wait after a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
We were wondering what was happening. We were trying to tell ourselves that no news is good news, hopefully, but what's going on, all right? And so during that time period, my wife had gotten an opportunity to go up to New York and, be in the Broadway Dance Center, and so she did, to go and advance her career. And then I went up with her, and I told the documentary crew, hey, I have to go up there too.
And what are you feeling like? I'd imagine that's a lot of just anxiety and pressure of constantly having that, just like you said, a black cloud just following you around.
That's it, dude. That's exactly what I was about to say, is every family dinner I had, every outing we had, every time we would go out to a restaurant or go walk the park or do something as a family, go to the movies, there was still this dark cloud over me that I couldn't really truly enjoy this, because I don't know if I'm ever going to be torn away from my family again. God forbid that would be the case, because that was the hardest thing that I ever had to go through. The time came, man, where we were still checking every week. And this is the irony of it all. Pat Cadellis, the director, would be the one that actually checked every week. That would be there holding the camera, trying to get that footage, that money shot of that decision. Well, it came a time where he wanted to take a vacation, and he didn't know, and he was very hesitant because he didn't want to miss a week. He took a vacation to Hawaii, and he hired his cousin who lives in Jersey to come and get that shot. And so he hired his cousin, and it just so happens that week was the week where I checked the freaking TV, and there's my name. And so Pat at like 2:00 in the morning, I had checked it at 9 a.m. Pat at 2:00 in the morning was in Hawaii, literally kicking himself. This week, I've done 80 weeks with this guy, and this week when my cousin is the one that's going to get the money shot of what the decision is going to be, right? And so that's what's happening behind the scenes for him. And then for me, my heart just dropped in my freaking stomach, because this is the answer, right?
Yeah, you're like, I don't care what you're feeling, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like, I started feeling for him after the fact, because it was better news than bad news. But when I look at that TV and I click on it, and when I saw my name, it doesn't necessarily automatically say what the findings are, right? And what I'm looking for is relief granted, relief granted, relief granted, relief granted on all 6 of my claims, right, that I had filed with the CCA. I saw my name, and I immediately looked, and I just took a deep breath. This is what we've been waiting for. And there was my name at the top of the list, and the category on the top of the list is relief granted. And my name was the only name in that topic. And then when I clicked on it, like, relief happened to me, but I don't know which claims have been relieved. I click on it, and all claims, relief granted, relief granted, relief granted. Then I got to the last one, the 6th one, which was the actual innocence. If that one's granted, then I am exonerated. My conviction's overturned, and my life is back. And it says relief granted.
Wow, man.
And I break, and I put my face in my hands, and I just say, thank God, thank you, Lord. And a couple minutes later, I hear a big banging on the door, and it's my wife running. She ran down 5th Avenue, throwing her Yeti tumbler, her bag left and right, running home. And the documentary gets an image of her and I embracing and crying together, and keeps asking me, is it over? Is it over? Is it over? We can't believe it's over.
I bet that the word relief too is probably an understatement.
Oh yeah, that's, man, if I could tattoo that on my forehead, I would. Like, it's just, it's what I felt. It felt just relief. That cloud just seemed to subside, and the storm felt like, the sun was breaking through the storm, and life was, I don't know, for a long time it felt like it just turned into 100 miles an hour really quick, because there was an interview here, interview there, and I was just like, man, I just want to calm down and enjoy this for a second. And we already getting booked flights to go home and get ready for the actual exoneration ceremony in court, and it happens. And a month later, November 6th, 2019, I stand court. The same courtroom that I was convicted in was the one where I got told that I've been found actually innocent and I am exonerated. And we are sorry that this had happened to you. That's what the judge said. And from there, by faith, my girlfriend and I, Gabriel, I had proposed to her, by the way, in 2017 when I got out of jail on an appeal bond, right? And I had proposed to her in Cabo, on the beach. It's in the documentary as well. They followed me to Cabo. And by faith, we were planning our wedding for January 19th of 2020. Thank God it happened in January 19th of 2020, because coming March, the world seemed like it shut down a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't have had a ceremony, to say the least. But we got married January 19th of 2020, 2 months after I was exonerated. And we planned that by faith. We prayed, man. We prayed when we were just planning this wedding, saying, God, we trust you. We put our marriage in you. We're going to do it your way, no other way. And we trust that we're going to walk down this aisle, both of us, and we're going to give each other to each other, fully free. And,
it's beautiful, bro.
Yeah. So we got married, and, I got to play 1 year of collegiate football. The same defensive coordinator who was holding out to the very end of my trial back years and years prior. And so after I was exonerated, like, my social media has me training, getting football back. I was keeping up with the NFL Pro Bowl guys and all that. And so I got a call from Coach Neil Nethery up in Eastern Michigan. He had retired. He's retired now, but he called me up and said, "Hey, I think you got some eligibility left. You ever want to play football again?" I said, "I've been wanting to play football for the past ever. Let's go." And he's like, "Well, you come up here, you got a full ride. Let's get that back for you." And so I went to go up there, and I went up there at 27 years old, and I was a little older than everybody else.
Yeah.
I needed to scratch that itch, make it full circle. I'm writing my memoir right now, so I'm happy that that's going to be in it. And decided to hang it up, come back home, be a husband, start a family. We bought a home. Continue with my business to this day. And when I hung up football, I felt there was a void, because and I say this because I know that I'm not the only person that goes through this, because everybody has trauma. If you're going through drugs or anything, anything that has to do with trauma, and it feels like whenever you try to move on from it, you moved on from it. You have. I mean, you're rocking and rolling. You're living for the next day. Everything seems good. Then you have those days where it seems like the monsters just don't go away. You wake up and you just don't feel right. And it's just the trauma. It's just the trauma coming back. It's kind of imprinted into your DNA. And but I know God is good, though. And right after I take all that to him and lay it at the cross, I remember the mission. I remember that a lot of times, even with Christ coming to this world, he made a mess into a mission. He came on a mission. And the only way I felt like that I could get the monsters away from me, the monsters of the what if monsters, right? The what if I went to the NFL? right? What if I could have been all I could be in football, right? What if I never moved into that home? What if I was never Jonathan's friend? Well, the only way that you keep those monsters away is that you operate in your mission. That was once your mess. So I decided to start a foundation called the Vindication Foundation, which is a foundation that spreads education and awareness. And if we can, it would be like winning a Super Bowl if we can exonerate somebody. We're spreading education and awareness specifically when it comes to investigations, but this is something that not a lot of people take seriously, but jurors, everyday people like you, me, and everybody else who gets that slip in the mail, like I said earlier, because I use my case as an example, is when I got exonerated, one of the jurors in my case who convicted me on that day in that court came forward and told the truth of what happened back in that deliberation room when they went back after the judge gave them instructions that if they don't have a verdict, then this is what was going to happen.
Crazy, man. My mind is blown about your story. Appreciate you sharing with us today. I'm glad that the truth was finally set free, and I'm even more glad that you've turned your pain into purpose through your foundation and what you're doing for guys behind bars, especially those that have been wrongly convicted or potentially have been wrongly convicted, and that they have a champion in them now. Somebody fought for you, and to see that you're fighting for others is really amazing. And so I appreciate you sharing everything with me today. And so, but yeah, man, it's been amazing. Appreciate
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's been an honor for me. I respect what you guys do. We need what you do. Man, when I was in prison, I heard this phrase, and I thought it was amazing because it's so true. And I use it all the time when I think about the men in prison, is those bars and those walls, they're meant to keep men in, but they can't keep God out.
Thanks again for listening to the God Behind Bars podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll subscribe from wherever you're listening to this. Leave us a review and share with your family and friends. We're so thankful to all of those that make it possible for us to continue to reach inmates with the gospel. If you'd like to donate to support the work of God Behind Bars, you can visit godbehindbars.com/donate.